What industry is shadier than most people realize? Trucking. The margins are razor thin and so everyone is trying to nickel and dime each other constantly. The drivers lie to their dispatchers. The dispatchers lie to the brokers lie to the clients. All of this for like $50, $100 sometimes. Some will give their drivers time limits they can't make without speeding, but make speeding tickets the driver's responsibility. And I've also heard on Reddit that some install governors that prevent you from going over a certain speed. Then there's the laws on how long you can drive, and how long a break you need to take before driving again. Those often don't get followed. The tattoo industry isn't necessarily shady, but there are some major gaps between good artists and crappy ones. I have worked with straight up crackheads who I wouldn't let draw on me in marker. Yet year after year they find work in shops. Always check portfolio and talk to the artist. If they seem sketchy or disinterested, note the frick out. Dietary supplements. It's gotten better, but there's still a lot of half-truths and whole lies. Not all that long ago it was seriously like the wild wild west. Dentistry, particularly dental chains like Aspen Dental, Bright Now, Affordable Dentures, Coast, etc. When I worked for Aspen, every office had to meet its financial goal at the end of the month. Oftentimes this meant exaggerating a patient's treatment plan and scaring them into unnecessary, expensive surgeries, that is, a 15-year-old getting a full mouth extraction and put into dentures. I once worked for a dentist who told us that everyone who walks in the door has gum disease. Everyone. And the assistants would compete to see who could get the most people to agree to an oral cancer screening. Are you 25 years old and never smoked a cigarette or drank alcohol? Great, you absolutely need an oral cancer screening because Shannon really wants that Starbucks gift card. Shady billing and insurance claims. Straight up fraud, charges tacked onto bills that weren't discussed, like a $150 electric toothbrush you never agreed to purchasing. I ran far away from that place and never looked back. I interviewed for affordable and got an offer, but it's the same racket. Yeah, my husband and I went to Aspen once and they tried to tell me that I immediately needed 3 cavities filled and that my husband had periodontal disease and the only thing that would stop all his teeth from falling out was an expensive treatment once every 2 weeks. We noped out of there and went to a small dentist office where they found nothing. It was crazy. The credit card industry. There's a whole high-risk segment of the industry dedicated to preying on young people, old people, or people with bad financial histories and issuing them cards at extremely high interest rates. If you have a crappy credit score, be wary of any credit card offers you get. Hey, I don't have great credit and I get offers in the mail a few times a week. It's absolutely ridiculous. Marketing and advertising. We can track and buy so much data on people to directly place specific ads. I can track the locations of cell phones and send ads based on the places you have physically been even if it isn't directly related to my business. I am on an away rotation at a Veterans Affairs hospital. There is a major issue with employees who are either indifferent or incompetent when it comes to managing life-threatening illnesses. I think everyone knows this, but not everyone has witnessed this firsthand and seen the degree of incompetence with their own 2 eyes. I've had multiple occasions where I got called to evaluate a stroke patient, only to find that the primary team has no idea where they are. I'll hunt down the patient myself and find them alone in a hallway, or in a CT scanner, completely obtunded, and the primary team has no idea where they are. I saw a nurse delay stat seizure medications by 4 hours on a patient who was actively seizing, and documented that she did give the medication on time. I had a nurse walk out of a code because she didn't feel like doing it. I took care of a man who died from anoxic brain injury because the primary team over-diuresed a heart failure exacerbation. I have reported these incidents up the proper chain of command and nothing gets done about it. The bad employees still work here. If you are a veteran and have a life-threatening emergency, go to a non-VA hospital. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. There is no ownership of responsibility at the VA. This may seem fairly obvious, but the entire real estate industry is awash in overseas and laundered money in the United States, to the point that several markets would totally crash without these buyers. Everyone knows, no one cares. Olive oil. The amount of counterfeit olive oil is insanely higher than you think. you have a higher chance of buying olive oil that's been cut than buying real olive oil. How do I get the real crap? Education. People are constantly trying to find ways to line their pockets instead of focusing on the students. And I say this while working for what I consider to be one of the better school districts in my state. Teachers need more money, but all the admins and staff don't need six-figure salaries. The fashion industry. They rely on third world factories to make their products and pay them pittance. Then sell their products on for 10 times the price they pay the salary for their staff and factory workers. Collections. Yeah, I know most people assume they're shady, but I don't think most people know just how shady. There are clear laws in the US defining what a collections agency can and can't do, how often they can contact you, what sort of pressure they can apply, what they can threaten you with, etc. These laws are not ambiguous. They leave little or no wiggle room, and yet low rent CAs violate them all the time. They'll buy debt for pennies on the dollar that's past the statute of limitations, meaning it's not legal to collect on it, then start calling the debtor and harassing them for payment. They'll call debtors and threaten them with legal action, tell them that a process server is on the way to their house, that the IRS is going to audit them, that their wages will be garnished and assets seized. All blatant lies meant to scare the person into paying up. And I'm not talking about scammers from India here. I'm talking about legally registered collection agencies right here in the US. So how do they get away with this? Because the vast majority of people don't know their rights. They're already dealing with the stress and shame of being deep in debt with no way to pay it off. So if someone who sounds authoritative calls them up and lists all of the terrible things that are going to happen, they just assume that's correct. And the few times somebody knows enough to fight back, the worst that happens is that the CA pays a fine of a few $1,000s. That's usually covered by their liability insurance, and even if it isn't, it's just the cost of doing business. Small price to pay for the cash they're raking in. And if they really get slammed, they can just close up shop and reopen under a different name. It's a really sleazy business with a lot of bad actors. Shades. No, really. Most of the branded ones are owned by a single company called Luxottica. It's a monopoly. Specifically in the US. Sporadically in other countries. Academia. Yes, it does function like an industry, again specifically in the US, and can get really dang shady. Public, research-oriented universities are, mostly, above board, but the further you drift away from that the shadier crap gets. Diploma mills are a well-known phenomenon, but there are also plenty of legitimate or semi-legitimate establishments offering continuing education or distance education diplomas that are both expensive and not really worth the paper they're written on. Labor relations at most universities, including reputable ones, are okay but becoming increasingly messed up. Part-time, dead-end teaching contracts are increasingly popular and their conditions for the employee range from crappy to Dickensian. That isn't including the mandatory food plan scams, and facilitating the textbook industry, or other corporate partnerships that are not for the advantage of the students. The blood donation centers are shady AF. Source: former branch manager. One Blood and other blood buses are super shady. Employees are trained that every donor is a hero and that they are saving local lives. Horse crap. The blood is sold overseas to weird butt companies. The pint of blood a donor donated is worth several $100s depending on the day. The donor gets a t-shirt that we printed by the millions for pennies on the dollar. Blood centers make mega money, lie to donors, and treat employees like animals. Update: God forbid I actually disclose a personal life experience. No more comments from me. I shouldn't have to defend myself. The US agriculture industry. It's illegal to record videos or take pictures in slaughterhouses. Yet, in the UK it's required by law. To add on to this, almost anything in the food production industry and agriculture, regulations that barely hold any power, ambivalent enforcement, lobbyists for the various major commodities, subsidies, allowances for pesticides and environmental contamination. Most people have no idea where their food comes from, how it's produced, or the regulations regarding it. Car sales. I install computers at car dealerships. The salespeople don't pay attention to me while I work because I'm not a customer. I overhear them talking so much crap about all of their customers to the point that it's sad. It seems like they're always trying to rip people off. The construction industry. You'll be amazed how much contractors try to cut corners and do shady crap to save on money. You know the joke about people standing around watching others work? Yeah, they're actually working too. Specifically making sure the guys doing the construction aren't cheating. In a world without construction regulation and enforcement, your house gets a big freaking crack in it due to crappy soil work and now you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars to get that fixed. Hole watching is a more critical profession than I thought. Car dealerships are the worst. In a lot of places in the States, you can't order directly from the factories and legally have to buy through a dealership, and the dealerships will take a big cut of that. Also in my state, the big car dealerships successfully lobbied to make buying a car illegal on Sunday, and although I can't remember how it worked, the unofficial reason for it was because it would hurt smaller dealerships. Thankfully I think most people realize they are pretty shady. Slaps roof of automobile industry. This bad boy can fit so much shadiness in it. The funeral industry. They're a business like any other. Don't tell them how much money you have to spend because they will spend it all. Newsflash people. That mahogany casket with silk pillows you got for grandma protects her from the elements just as much as a simple plywood would. One of the benefits of being a Muslim is that you're buried naked in a white sheet. The coffin is just rented for the funeral. Bottled water. Not just the high markup, but also the source of the water. It's perfectly legal to name it something like Nature's Spring and sell tap water. Olive oil. Some estimates put the amount of mislabeled low quality or otherwise adulterated olive oil on the shelves as high as 80%. Labels often lie about things like country of origin or whether the oil is actually extra virgin. Sometimes you might actually just be buying canola oil with green food coloring. The Mafia is heavily involved, and government regulators do precious little to stop it. Scientific publishing. But the culture around publishing is terrible. Scientists have to publish to keep their job. More publications equals more grants equals job security, but only positive results tend to get published, so people overstate the significance to get published, or rush experiments to beat the competition, or throw on some statistics without knowing what they're doing, or lose their job because that something wasn't the case and they didn't get published, only to have someone else fall into that pitfall later. The scientific problems tend to get fixed over time simply because so many people work on a topic, but many individual scientists lose to the pressure and leave the field, or worse. The EPA rules on air pollution are comical. Basic rule is that if you measure it you need to report it. So polluters find all sorts of loopholes where they do measure the pollution but do it in a way that has no record. Stuff like using Draeger tubes or sulfur emissions, and make sure the only person with knowledge of it is gone when the inspector comes in. But the EPA brings it upon themselves. All they have to do is force people to report it, and spend $10 a day on a freaking tube. Even more comical is contract construction work for oil field projects. A lot of these guys get paid by the day hour, and when the contract runs out they are out of work. Sabotage is rampant. There are stories of electrical techs getting done with a job, and suddenly the next day all the wires are cut. My favorite is we was doing a tay and investigating some valves that wouldn't close. We found yoga pants wrapped around the valve stem. This leads to many questions. Was the yoga pants naturally produced in the earth? Did some operator get lucky with hot yoga chicken threw her pants into a compressor? Even shady other companies get wind of the shady stuff going on, so they have creative ways of getting the construction guys out before they can commit sabotage. Like they'll knock on their door and tell them, we paying you for a week but you gotta leave now, and take them straight on a bus to a chartered plane and send them back down to Calgary before they can start breaking crap. Heck, the oil industry up in Canada is so freaking shady. I could go on for days about some of the crap they do. Even after all of the light put on Hollywood, we don't have a freaking clue to the depths of depravity in that industry, and it's been going on since the 1920s at least. We've let that crap slide for a freaking century. IT shops. IT consulting. For every good IT company, there's 3 others that will cut every corner. x 10 million. So if the IT company caters mostly to residential, they will cut every corner, cut down the middle, across. Really, they just put the whole thing in the shredder. I've seen VPNs without authentication. Literally just pop in an IP address and you're in their entire network. Intentional sabotage of computers and servers. Grossly overcharging for items. Bonus if they used a free product to fix the issue, they overcharge for that states not for commercial use. We've gotten clients that were told oh but competitor they left said Windows XP is fine. We then later find out they have spent hundreds of dollars a quarter working on fixing issues with said computer, putting in bids for big government jobs and accidentally leaving off entire builds so their price was the lowest, won the bid, and later requote the job they already won. Literally swapping out good quality parts in a customer's computer server with inferior equivalents, when the customer just needed a keyboard replacement, later selling the parts they stole. One of our competitors does a client's alarm system, but we do their IT. They went into the server room and rearranged battery backup devices to cover the vents on the server so it would overheat, which it did. All from sketchy IT companies that are more concerned about being the cheapest and fastest and not the professional, proper, and security compliant. TLDR. You know horror stories from sketchy mechanics purposely breaking your car, or doing other sketchy crap? Yeah, IT as a service is just as bad, if not worse, especially if they cater to residential. The ad industry isn't necessarily shadier than most people think it is, but it's shady for a different reason than most think. We deal in half-truths or only telling part of the story, the good part of course, but we don't just spin outright lies. That would be illegal and fairly easy to prosecute. A great example of this was when I was briefed once on a laundry detergent that is sold at Walmart and dollar stores. Poor people buy it. The brief from the client was simple: we could now say brand X. Now with fabric softener, the problem was we couldn't say it softened clothes, because in all the tests the stuff didn't work. But we could say now with fabric softener and let the consumers, mistakenly of course, subconsciously assume that of course it must soften clothes, because it comes with fabric softener. For those concerned about my soul, I'm saving it right now by working at a good cause agency. Security, Securitas, Nord, Allied, etc. These minimum wage security jobs for Tyson Conagra facilities and such are not even close to professional. These people have zero legal authority beyond standard citizenship. When I worked in security, my supervisors were always failed military enthusiasts with an inflated sense of nationalism. Hiring was often done on site, and for state training you did a 4-hour seminar at some rented out office building. One place where I worked, the security supervisor was fired for taking home copies of recorded videos of close-up security camera footage of female employees at the facility. Not everyone working security is a bad person, but it's mostly people who were turned away by military police forces, so you're dealing with the worst kind of rejects sometimes. The games industry. By and large it is notoriously crappy to its workers, unless one was a key member of a smash hit game. If you work in the games industry, be prepared to look for a new job every 12-18 months depending on the success of your game. Also be prepared to be paid anywhere from 50-75% of what you would be paid for similar work in the rest of the technology industry, unless of course you're one of the aforementioned rock stars. Do you work in the gaming industry on contract? I've got bad news for you. Many companies rely on armies of contractors for things like testing. Not an uncommon or inherently shady practice on its own, but many of these companies use a recruiting tactic that amounts to, do you like playing video games? Wanna get paid for it? Come be a tester. The problem with that is that testing video games effectively doesn't come anywhere close to playing them. What you end up with is large groups of disillusioned people who take no ownership in their work, whose work is never guaranteed beyond 3-6 months, who are given far less credibility and voice than testers in every other software industry, and for whom many the draw of working on games is getting to say you work on games. But what if you're a contract tester and you really do care and want to make this a career? At best you'll be put in charge of this army of jaded butts in seats and still let go along with the rest of them when launch hits, and suddenly, somehow, the need for that level testing is seen as unnecessary despite today's games as a service model and no reduction in the amount of content being generated. If there's one industry that needs to unionize today, it is the gaming industry. And we haven't even touched on the business side of things. Valve and Steam are everything Reddit tends to accuse EA of being. They just do a much better job with PR and keeping it quiet when things go wrong. They provide enough consistent value to convince us all to look the other way. For every indie success story from Greenlight, there's a dozen that tried to get started and failed under the crushing weight of the requirements Valve has for being on Steam. Pharma. In my experience, the employees mean well, but fundamentally rich people pay until the patent life of a drug before the poor can afford it. Even if it's necessary, that feels shady to me. The beauty and hair industry is predicated on making you feel bad about the way you look so that you'll pay money to look better. And keep paying. Get your hair cut once a month. Gotta do your highlights. Get your nails done. And if you don't, you're ugly and people won't hire you for jobs, date you, or treat you kindly. It creates a problem where there wasn't one and keeps you coming back for more. Lots of industries like that. I spoke to a marketer recently who touted the creation of the tooth whitening industry as the marketing success of the century. I had brought it up as a specific example of how cancerous marketing can be to society. The American comic book industry. Starting rate for a penciled page for the biggest companies is $125, $150. For 12-16 hours per page, that's about $10 an hour for a craft you went into debt to learn. Drawing characters that are recognizable around the world. And unless you're one of the handful of rock stars in the industry, you're not even considered a meaningful member of the creative team. You're not allowed to interpret anything. You're just supposed to mindlessly execute the will of the writer. Before Disney threw out all of their animators, it was very similar for them. Near minimum wage for tirelessly making the thing that makes the company hundreds of millions of dollars. This is why IE will take over creative industries sooner than people are willing to admit. Frontline creatives are already treated like robots by the companies they work for. Corporations won't really have to make any changes to the workflow to make the switch. We revere entertainment and culture so much but give no respect or reward for the people who create it. The P industry. Unfortunately, too many get exploited and are forced to do things they aren't comfortable with to try and survive. I mean, I'm pretty sure most people recognize that industry is super shady. I'll toss out an interesting one that may not follow the rules, but YOLO. Accounts payable for any big company when dealing with a small company. Let's say you start a business selling and fixing widgets. Then one day a massive Fortune 500 drops an order 100x bigger than anything you've ever done before on you. This is it. This is the big time. You're gonna be rich and your business is gonna be a success. So you buy equipment, hire staff, increase your capacity to fill these orders, and then suddenly, all you have is your deposit, or worse, nothing. Where's the rest of your bill? So you call their accounts payable, receivable depending on your company, and they tell you that they cut checks on 30th of every month. Well, that doesn't do you a lot of good. You have to pay your employees every 2 weeks. So you take out a loan based on the sale at an outrageous interest rate. Then the 30th finally comes and your check isn't there. So you go call whoever your contact is and they tell you that they stopped payment because 5% of your widgets are defective and you need to adjust your invoice. So you do so and suddenly, nope, gotta wait till the 30th again. So you decide you aren't going to send them orders anymore until they pay you. Then you get a phone call from your contact spot asking, yelling, why you stopped sending shipments. When you respond that you need payment, he informs you that checks are cut on the 30th. Then you have a choice. You can continue to gamble and hope you eventually get paid, or cut them off and lose your biggest client. So you gamble again, take out another loan and carry on. Finally the 30th rolls around again and you get your check, except a decimal is put in the wrong place. $2 million check is only $200,000. So then you call and spend 2-3 weeks trying to get an adjusted check. By this time you're running on empty. You can't get any loans and your only option is to sue them. Oh wait, you're out of money, can't afford a lawyer, and they have a GC on staff ready to drag this out until your business folds. You can't just go back to your old clean base because you leveraged yourself to have these huge orders coming in. That's how mom and pop small businesses get treated by the big guys. Now the business folding is the extreme end of the hyperbole spectrum, but this is something that even Trump's company has done. Scrap metal recycling yards. More than half of the stuff that is brought in is stole from someone or some work site. Air conditioner units, grills, bikes, you name it, and head will try to scrap it. The owners don't care who brings it in or where it came from. It's all money to them. Game companies nowadays want you to pre-order everything, and they also want you to purchase random loot boxes for games that aren't even complete when they launch. Political consultants. They don't really care about a campaign winning. They are more interested in fabricating opposition so they have a reason to scam more money out of donors. Political parties are just big money makers for consultants. Billions of dollars. Renaissance fairs. I can only speak for my own, but most employees are conned into this summer of a lifetime volunteering crap. And if you're lucky enough to get paid to stand in the sun for 9 hours a day, it's a gracious stipend of maybe $40 a day. We're supplied strange tasting water and camp in sometimes hazardous conditions. Not to mention the rampant creep culture of older men grooming young girls and all manner of sexual insanity going on behind the scenes. This doesn't even account for the managerial shenanigans and competition between fairs. Be kind to the goons in the costumes, and maybe tip them if they make you laugh. They need it. Nail salons. I think more people realize it now, since the Knit article a few years ago, but a whole lot of them utilize human trafficking for labor, are unlicensed, and/or are prostitution fronts. Youth sports camps clinics. To be clear, organized youth sports leagues are often run coached by volunteers and generally have athletes' best interest in mind. But off-season camps clinics, after practice training, one-on-one coaching, are disturbingly shady. The coaches for the paid clinics know they can massively overcharge for extra training sessions because they know parents are desperate to see their kids succeed. Then they end up teaching the exact same thing the unpaid coach was teaching. One of the worst scams is when a coach for a sport offers extra paid one-on-one sessions with the implication that participants are more likely to make the team or get playing time. High school baseball is notorious for this. A guy I coached wrestling with a few years ago would convince the parents to send their kids to after practice sessions at $20 a pop. He would tell them during regular practice, come to a session tonight and I'll show you how to do that move properly. It drove me crazy because we were already getting paid to coach them at regular practice. He just wanted to double dip. The clinics are often word of mouth, cash only, and uninsured, which means there is little to no recourse when an athlete gets injured. And they do get injured at a higher rate because the camps aren't under the same scrutiny as the normal leagues. They aren't required to have licensed medical staff available like normal high school leagues. Lastly, they often burn out the athletes who are losing their time off from the sport. A 14-year-old shouldn't be playing just one sport year-round. Winter baseball, spring football, summer wrestling. They're all just as likely to make a kid hate the sport as they are to make them better. Auto shipping. All sites people will say we have trucks in the area. It will be there in 1 week. One truck with home delivery, etc. You only work through brokers who list you a price, $600, that they think they can ship it for plus a commission. They take your $100 and list your car for $500 on a nationwide auto shipping website. Transport drivers get on the site and accept bids. If they are going NY, LA, they will pick cars to make the most money. Your car may never leave. It may leave right away. You have no control over who takes it, how many times it changes hands, etc. Many horror stories involve brokers listing items paid on delivery and requesting $500 from you when it arrives, when you've already paid the broker $600. The car arriving damaged from loading unloading multiple times. Brokers requesting more money after a deal has been struck, etc. This isn't nearly as shady as some of the other comments, but K-12 US literature curriculum is pulling the wool over the eyes of anti-Common Core states. There are far more large population states particularly California, that embrace Common Core than lower population states that detest it. K-12 literature textbooks are now written in line with Common Core teachings, and when a company bids for approval and adoption in an anti-state, they simply strip the Common Core standard numbers and plop in the state's standards that fit. There's hardly any rewriting, restructuring, and the content writers still write based on Common Core standards, but someone else goes on and changes the standards numbers. This isn't entirely malicious by big city elites condemning small town states for not adopting Common Core. Writing textbooks is expensive, so reworking already made ones for new states has been an industry practice for decades. There are really only 2 states that got custom textbooks, and that's California and Texas, because their markets are so massive that writing a textbook specifically for them was worth it. Every single person in the US who went at least one grade to a K-12 school pretty much used a modified, stripped down California or Texas textbook. What makes this funny though is since Common Core spans multiple states, including California, even Texas is getting Common Core based textbooks that are just modified for them. TLDR, nearly every kid in the US is taught literature using Common Core methods, even if a state is vehemently against the method. The sugar industry. It's becoming more well known nowadays, but they spent millions of dollars conducting false research and paying experts to say that fat was the cause of high cholesterol, diabetes, etc. Now we know it was sugar all along. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.